Hello. As promised, I am going to be doing a kind of fleet and submission evaluation and like maybe improvements part of this tournament, this mini tournament. So here we go. So first we have Lolo 2345's farmer submission. This submission was kind of weak to splash and a little slow. I think he could have done better on these heavy barges by using some the farmer's armor and super thrusters, which were allowed. So something like this. Uh, it just got the farmer armor and then super thrusters. It does have better stats. As you can see, this barge has around 40,000 HP, and this barge, the improved version, has almost 3 times the amount. It also has it is cheaper by a lot and a little bit faster as well. You can see this the improved is 150 and the improved is 130. Uh, these Sparrow missiles as well, usually they're just very weak. They do have launcher barrage, so if you have a bunch of them, you're gonna have a big burst damage. But you can, they have uh, 2 health. 2 health is no, and yeah, and then the spitter weapons are usually not very effective. So just because they're very low velocity, it's very hard for them to hit anything. But the Avengers are a good choice, and the point defense lasers are some of the best point defense in the game. Another problem with this first barge is it doesn't really have any turning thrusters, so it did exhibit butt ship a lot of times where the ship flies backwards. It wasn't too much of a problem because the ship is armored equally well on each side, but if you put the thrusters more towards the front or like something in an arrangement like this, so it can like turn, it would help a lot. So yeah, there's that big barge, and then the medium barge pretty much does the same thing. I remove the spitters, and just put guns along the middle and the missile in the back. I try to keep the style as close as possible. And then his sort of attack ship, it just wasn't fast enough or armored enough to like go in and like do loads of damage. So right here, the second version that he could have done, again using farmer armor and super thrusters. He's using the bigger shield because it, during the tournament we could see like a bunch of ships just can't get through the shields, like most of the Sentinel designs, and then Sparrow missile, Iron Bob Sparrow missile designs. Uh, so it does go twice as fast, so it is able to crush down enemies. I think what Lobo was trying to do with this is a little bit more expensive, but not by a lot, and it does have is around 15,000 health, 6 times more health, so it is a lot more tanky, and the shield is better, so it won't get like one-shotted by mortars and things like that. Same with these, like the mortars should not reach the middle. These are big enough to block mortar shots. And then his missile platform. I don't know if it was supposed to be like just a kind of slow-moving platform or like an actual kiter to like dodge enemies, but I kind of made it into a kiter. Just using the super thrusters, it kind of went too fast, so like I had to add these counterweights, and you don't really need the shield if the enemy can't hit you. So there's that. Next, the Ancient One submission. This submission was pretty good, especially for a first-time tournament player. So the first of all, his missile ship, it was actually very effective. It was very fast enough. Ignore these little squares. It's just sandbox weird glitches. It was very good. It was able to like go close range and long range. So I think it doesn't really need to be changed, but if you want it to be more of a kiter, you can place the plasma cannon with a railgun, and it does make it a little bit cheaper. And then his shield ship, uh, protector. I get the feeling that this was supposed to kind of like tank for the rest of its allies, but shields aren't a very good choice usually because they have less efficiency than just pure armor. So just by putting armor instead of shields, space armor like this, it would be a little better. And then no one used the asteroid thrusters, which was kind of interesting because if you just cap it, then it is better. So usually people think they're not good because they seem really slow, but that's because of the thruster boost and force right here. You can see in the box. But if you cap it with a normal thruster, then it negates the negative thruster boost and it's just as effective as a regular thruster. It does also have a lot of health. His mortar ships were also very good, and I don't really think they could be any better than this. They did the job. They were quite fast. I think maybe adding some turning thrusters at front would help them a little bit. And then they did seem to like the skirmish, so if you put these mortars on primary and this missile on primary, if the ship shields go down and the mortars are destroyed, it'll just rely mainly on this missile as kind of an AI trigger. And then his distractors were really good as well, except they didn't do any damage, so they kind of just floated along the edge of the map. And that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. They did distract a fair amount, but if you want them to be more engaged, you could add a burst laser, which makes it a little more expensive, or even if you just want it to be a really cheap distractor, a point defense cannon just makes a good distractor as well. So prototype Ryler Farmer, it was a pretty decent design. It almost beat Debris. It just, I feel like it was mainly a very aesthetic, cool-looking design, and it was definitely aesthetic and cool-looking. I did have a lot of fun building this faction, or rebuilding this fleet. It was mainly kind of a rushing fleet, and then with the missiles as kind of supplementary long range and like close range splash. But I think having a dedicated close range ship and then a dedicated long range ship would have helped maybe a little bit, but I feel like the farmer missiles did help close range with like flash and finishing off enemies. So like that's one kind of fleet composition you do, like a few kiters or a few long range and then a few short range. And then if you want to make it a little tankier, I did have a lot of fun with this one. You just use farmer armor and a bunch of super thrusters. It is a little bit slower. You can see 200 acceleration, and then his originals are 270, so a quarter slower, but they do have a similar amount of firepower. But they are much more armored, 200,000 HP versus 30,000 HP. And then, of course, with this size, you don't really need a shield because it's just big enough to block mortar hits. One thing I forgot to do is maybe just move the shield back so the core can't get sniped from behind. But other than that, it was pretty surprisingly effective. I liked it a lot. Here, Ixwa's Tinkroll. I do feel like there's not a lot that could be done with Tinkroll because the rules did kind of nerf them a lot. They didn't have their main advantage, which is range, and there's that. But Ixwa did do a very good job at kind of like bursting down ships when they could aim correctly. And it is pretty hard, pretty challenging to get Tinkroll to aim right, but the thing about this weapon setup is it is twice the P as like something if you use like rate adapters or rate amplifiers. So like if you do a single gun like this, Each of these add 50%, and I'm not really sure how it calculates. So 50% rate, it doubles the damage, and this is like 70p, and this is 80p times 2. So you can see the 4.5 thousand DPS. This is similar. Or wait, I think I changed something. But yeah, another problem that Ixwell seemed to struggle with is the core was very exposed at the back. So just by moving the shield to the back and kind of spreading out the shields more evenly, I think would have helped a lot. And again, it did have some troubles with energy, but there's not a lot of space on this small ship. So there's that. The only minor thruster change I would do is just space these forward. Usually Tinkerel, I just find that usually like diagonal facing forward paired with the Tinkerel's recoil like makes a pretty good sniper. And that is Ixwell's Tinkerel. And I am Bob's Kiters. Unfortunately, in my opinion, he used some of the weakest weapons in the game. The Phalanx, it does have a lot of range, but with only 2 of them, it is not very good at shooting down anything at all. It only does 50 damage per second, and although it is pretty cheap, that is just usually not what you want for point defense. It's just too weak and too kind of spready. And again, with the Sparrow missiles, they have 2 health, and they are very easily shot down. He did beat Cookie Creeper's submission, which is good because that means his kiters behave well and don't get too close. And he does go much faster than 500 acceleration backwards. Or wait a second. Maybe I was on drugs or something. Never mind. Just ignore me right there. But anyway, usually these small farmer missiles are not a good choice unless you want to like kind of distract or like something like that. So what could be done is, first of all, add the super thrusters. They add a lot more thrust. You can go a lot faster. There was no backwards acceleration requirement or maximum, so you could just go ludicrously fast backwards. Then the larger farmer missiles are usually better. Let me see if I can like, kind of show something. So we have the Sparrow missile and the medium missile right here. And if I take control, you can see that that's like almost double the range, and this small missile doesn't go very fast at all compared to like the size. And then the explosion is much bigger. So yeah, there is that as well. So usually the Sparrow missiles, again, are just not a good choice. But again, a missile only submission would have a lot of trouble getting through shields. Wait, let me show this. So like this is 600 or 460p, and this is 500p. So it does. Oh yeah, and then switch out for lasers for point defense. There's just some lasers, some of the best in the game, and just they're good. They're good. And then yeah, again, missile fighters do have trouble popping shields, especially these farmer missiles. They're mainly splash weapons. So like something with like scatter cannons or squatters that have a lot of damage per second for very cheap, and then put it on the the in the former palette there's weird big rectangular triangles that turn into equilateral triangles, but they have, I think, they have the most health of any whole block in the game, so they are very effective. And although they're not very mass efficient, with super thrusters you can easily make something that is efficient. So it's just something to take down the enemy shields while the missiles do the job. I think would have helped Iron Bob a lot. And then Cookie Creeper, the one that almost beat Imperiax. By literally switching around some thrusters, it easily beats Imperiax. Just something like having thrusters right here at the top so it can turn better, and then in the middle so it can kind of, the AI knows how to maneuver backwards. Like if it's just like pointed horizontal like this, if an enemy is behind, the AI sometimes has trouble like knowing that it can go backwards. But if you do point the turning thrusters a little bit backwards, the AI kind of can figure it out easier. And a lot of Cookie Creeper's fights were kind of, his ships didn't perform very well because they kind of just sat there because they couldn't really go backwards or turn, and the enemy just sniped their core from behind. And these turning thrusters easily solve that. They beat like this right here. I tested it. It beats everything except for debris, and even that is a coin flip. Another thing that Cookie Keeper kind of struggled with was kiters like Iron Bob. So if you like with this new thrust arrangement, the creepers won't be sitting still and letting the enemy like just kind of pound away at their armor. They would be like actively trying to turn towards the enemy, and any kiter would be have to shoot through the head, and would have to flank with two ships to get around to the rear. But if you do want to kill the kiters, you could put on some Gauss drones. I think this is the Gauss drone one. That is not the Gauss drone one. Some Gauss drones. They're pretty good anti-kiter countermeasures. Yeah, this is Cookie Creepers. It was a very good Sentinel brick. It performed very well, but it just had some turning issues. Now Lyle, he didn't really have trouble with kiters because of the large amount of Gauss drones he brought, but he did have a lot of trouble like doing damage because a lot of the time his ships were just kind of sitting targets. They could take a beating, but they just couldn't output enough damage. Well, let's start with his spike ships. I don't know, maybe there was something wrong with my CVARs or something. The spike ships didn't seem to cut as well, but you could make the cutting a little more effective by, first of all, removing the backwards thrusters and then the kind of widening the spikes so you have a bigger sweeping area. It does make the ship a little weaker, but that's just kind of a little design idea rather than the actual ship. I'm not really sure how to make this big one better. I think it just looks too cool for me to get my filthy fingers on it. But yeah, Lyoth did, and his kiters were very good. They were able to escape most enemies. They were pretty fast. And yeah. Now, skill, he did pretty well at swarming enemies, but it's just the flies can't get a beat on the enemy. They just teleport around and fly too fast, and their weapons are kind of not very good at all. Like, that is not a lot of damage that they do. What was I gonna do? But anyway, fly were allowed multi-core, so maybe just kind of doing something like that would help with energy production at least. So then they could fire the guns a little more consistently and teleport a little more, but there wasn't too much you could do with fly with their very small, the five parts. They got 5 parts in their palette. Not much you can do with that, unfortunately. Now, uh, Thursday's designs, they kind of look ramshackle, but I think they were thought about a little bit more than you might actually think. Uh, their burst lasers were pretty good at, or semi good at popping down shields, while the mortars could shoot things. But they did have this kind of generator stick on the outside, very very weak, and they do sometimes have uh, energy issues because the um something I was gonna say. Yeah, they can't really power their shields and power all their guns at once. Well, actually, maybe. But anyway, just I think putting the generator on the inside and maybe just switching out one of the flat cannons with an auto cannon to kind of take down shields a little bit better. But other than that, it was a pretty solid submission. Maybe kind of distribute the thrusters out a little more, not having stacks, because the AI does prefer having multiple options to choose from instead of just one stack of thrusters. Gives it a little bit more maneuverability. But that is about all for Thursday. And Crumb's board were they were pretty decent drone spawner, swarmer sort of thing, but they were a little too slow and kind of too centered around these drone launchers, which are pretty expensive. It would be probably better to do what Debris did and kind of put those on a blueprint. Unfortunately, these are subcommands, and I am 90% certain they don't even regrow. So like, if Sumple takes damage, he won't regenerate, and so if these get shot off, they won't regenerate into a new ship either. Also, I don't think he needs that many generators, so something like this with just a command which already produces energy, and with subcommands that's easily enough to power all these lasers. It was a bit weak splash because these were hit and then it was just detached, but I think with all these extra cores, if a flash hits here and detaches the core, these will all turn into like blueprints. So that it would make a pretty solid submission. And Xderp, I don't think he put a lot of effort into his submission. He just used the campaigns, as he said. But it really doesn't take a lot to make these a little bit better. Just make the armor bigger and use super thrusters, so then you can go faster. I think a lot of his problems were ships were catching up and easily killing his ships. So you're using the larger farmer shield, or you kind of like that ship in a bubble kind of feel. You can pretty much just make any of these scales bigger. That's what I kind of tried to do here. But there's that. I kind of didn't put too many thrusters on, but they are more expensive. But I think having fewer, larger, and more survivable ships would help a lot more for Xderp. Now Debris, although he did win a lot of fights, he wasn't perfect. One of his problems was his ships had a little bit of trouble turning. That may have been to like kind of keep the AI out of range while his blueprints did stuff, but I think his little distractors did that job pretty well. Like if he just wanted to stay alive. So just having a little bit of turning thruster, and then having thrusters maybe on his spokes, and making the spokes cover a little more area so they're easy to shoot off. Additionally, with these thrusters on the little struts, if one of these are shot off, the thrust becomes unbalanced and it kind of spins around, kind of like a pseudo spinner, which is kind of allowed, but maybe not, depending on how much people abuse that. And yeah, that was this is the debris. Blah, blah, blah. Yenyu ship. Honestly, perfect, perfect. This is the pinnacle of what this design could be. It was fast, rushed the enemy very well, and bursted them down, and it was a very good composition with uh, missile kiters from the back, which were able to sometimes uh, defeat those Cookie Creepers brawlers, and then like things to rush in and like do a lot of damage. So I think there's not much that I can see personally that could make this design better. So congrats. Drills. His ships were very good at hunting in a pack because they were the same, and I also think perfect. There's nothing I can do to make these better. I was kind of playing around with the larger scale plasma cannons, but these smaller scales they have a very small advantage in like P DPS efficiency, and they do have the ability to kind of split up if you were to use them as point defense. So this is very good. It does have a lot of armor on the outside, so it can shrug off a lot of hits and do a lot of damage. Congrats on being perfect. Imperiex, he just abused the hell out of my rules, and I don't think you can do any better than that. So, yeehaw. Lapsus fleet also had a very good fleet composition. 3 guys in the front, 2 kiters, and then a variety of distractors. And his ships kind of relied on speed to avoid taking damage, and that worked really well, especially with these Terran shields. So also perfect. There's nothing I can see that would make these better at all. They are truly excellent designs. And the last one, Insane Asylum. His ships were very good, kind of fast Sentinel, very, very healthy ships, but they did have trouble getting through shields. I would just recommend maybe just having one of these ships have plasma bolts, which have a little bit more damage per second, 450, 250. Yeah, so against the Terran shields, 250. That's with the shield's regeneration, that's 50 damage. 50 damage per second against those shields is just not enough. But it did very well, but just this has more damage per second to take down shields, so just one of each would probably be fine. And yeah, if you have any more suggestions that I don't know, maybe just the rules could have been better, but this is the first trial run. Here are some ships I would have submitted if I made them. They're just pretty much super thrusters and then the big farmer hull, and scatterguns and lasers, and then missile with just the bare minimum for us to meet their requirements, and then just maybe something weird like this, a Bolshevik on a stick that has thrusters and goes very fast, faster than the rules allow. So yeah, and that is all. Thanks for watching.